I'm here to talk about our SES deployment. I took the liberty of changing the title of the talk a bit, but I think this describes it a bit more accurately. I'm the CTO of Alma Mediapartners. Here are a few introductory slides. Here's the agenda for my talk. So introductions, then I'm going to tell about how we failed with sending email, and then I'm going to talk about how we recovered and improved with Amazon and SES and various other methods. We have some things that are still to be done. I'm going to explain about those, and then I'm going to give you some takeaways that you can introduce in your companies if you're involved in sending email. So who am I? Why should you listen to my talk? I have IT background for almost 20 years. I have a master's degree in software engineering. I've been doing a lot of system admin kind of things, so forth. I live and work in Tampere, so I'm not from Helsinki. I'm 40, married. I have kids. I've been doing AWS stuff since 2011, so quite many years already. It's evolving and keeps things interesting. Why am I here? Well, the usual stuff. I'm here to share about what we have learned. I'm here to learn about you and the other presenters, and also, of course, I'm here to promote our company as an employer. What is our company? We are part of Alma Media and a part of Alma Markets division. We do only digital services. We don't do any newspapers anymore. We used to. We have such services like etuovi.com, the interior design part, etuovi-sisustus, or Koti as it's known right now, autotalli.com, vuokraovi.com, Go Finland, you name it, all those stuff on the slides. Basically, we have consumer services, and then we have systems for businesses. We have ERP systems and similar, like Kivis for real estate management, ERP things and so forth. There are the financial figures. We have some 100 employees. That's probably a bit low number. We probably have more nowadays. We do most of our software in-house. So we do use subcontractors, but mainly for assisting and, as a helping hand. So we should know our domain and things we do. Okay. Why am I talking about emails? What a boring subject. We have all these push notifications and mobile applications and Facebooks and what have you. So why email? Well, it turns out that it's still a very relevant channel, especially for perhaps older people. Not everyone has jumped to the social media train, so we have to, maintain our email capabilities. We have to make sure that our emails go through, and basically we have to be aware of the channels that our customers are using. If our customers are using email, then we have to be there. If they're shifting onto social media or push notifications, then we have to react to that. I think that's a good advice. So when I'm talking about sending email, I'm mostly talking about sending automated email. I'm not talking about sending personal email to someone else. It's partially like the same kind of thing, but the automated part, when you are sending this kind of volumes of email per day, there are some special things that you have to consider. So Etuovi alone is sending 40,000 to 140,000 emails every day, and this doesn't even include the marketing emails and personal emails. So we send newsletters and various other mails as well, so they're not visible in this graph. Here are some examples of the messages. Our marketplaces send watchdog emails. So you can do a search for, let's say, in Etuovi you do a search for apartments. You can save the search criteria, and you can request that whenever a new announcement appears that matches to this criteria, you get an email informing you of this new announcement. So we send a lot of these mails. You can request an immediate watchdog email, or you can get like a bundled email once per day or once per week, I think. Those are the options. And these are very important because they pull people to our website. So there are competing portals like Oikotie, and they're also sending these similar messages. So the first service to get their message through to the customer's inbox usually gets the clicks and gets the traffic and gets the market share and business and so forth. So these are high volume mails. We send a lot of them. An individual single mail is not important, but still it's an important part of our operation and business. Another type of emails is lead emails. We have these contact forms on the web page, so you can request more information from, let's say, a real estate manager. And we don't send a lot of these mails, but if we lose one, you immediately lose the business because the real estate manager doesn't get the message and he doesn't know who to contact. And similarly for banks, for loan applications or insurance companies and so forth. It's a direct loss of customers and money if this mail gets lost. And some other examples: marketing messages, newsletters, personal messages, and then technical messages like password changes and what have you. So different kinds of volumes, different kind of importance. Why do lost emails matter so much? Well, it's about reputation of our service, of our websites, of how we do business. Even if it's not our fault exactly that a single email is lost, we also always get the blame anyhow. So even if it's, let's say, Gmail or Outlook or something that puts the mail into spam or junk mail folder, we get blamed for that because the customers don't see the mails and so forth. So we have to keep good sender reputation, if you will, to make the messages go through better. And also, sometimes the customers contact us and they're expecting an email and they know that it has been sent, but they haven't received it or they haven't found it yet. And we have to, our customer service, takes the information, writes it down, and then passes on it to our tech people. So there are multiple people involved in figuring out where this email is. So if we can improve the reliability, we have to do less work figuring out all these problems. So on to the story about how we failed with sending email. We had been sending email the same way essentially for years, maybe for 5 years or so. There were no changes to the operation, the way we send the mails, but still something happened and our system broke down and we got into trouble. Here's the initial infrastructure that had been running for years. So we basically have multiple websites or services that are sending email. Then we have email relays that basically pick up the mail that the application is passing on to the, to be sent. And the relays then take care of sending it over to the internet, to the intended target. And the purpose of the relay is take care of resending and queuing up the emails. So if the receiving end is offline for whatever reason and the message cannot be immediately delivered, then the relay will take care of the resending operation and so forth. And I put the 2 green arrows from relays to internet because we had 2 separate public IP addresses for the relays. This is important soon when I'll tell the rest of the story. Also, there's the yellow back channel from the target sites back onto our relays, and this is to mark that the knowledge of whether the single mail has been delivered to the target or not is only visible on the relay logs. It's a postfix application, nothing very special, can be installed for any Linux distribution and configured for use. So this was the monitoring or the way of figuring out for individual email if it's been delivered to the target or if it has bounced or failed somehow. Our admins had to go to the logs and read from there. So problems begin. One of our websites, let's say Vuokraovi, was abused. We had created poorly thought out implementation of a web form. Basically, you could enter the email address for where to send a mail, and then you had a separate field where you could type in some of the content that was supposed to be embedded in the email sent to this address. Well, it's pretty easy nowadays to craft a JavaScript that will actually replace entirely the content of the email with some other content. So clever spammers had found our open form from our website, and we received something like tens of thousands of calls from Singapore and China sending spam to various addresses. And we didn't know anything about this. We didn't have any monitoring or something that would tell us that there's something wrong. So it was a failure in, let's say, product design and implementation. We should never had this kind of open form on our website. It's don't do it, don't go there. The first indication of trouble was that some of our emails were not going through, and our customer service started getting some feedback. This kind of lead was sent and it was never received, and so forth. And there's a nice website and service called mxtoolbox.com that can be used to monitor these relay IP addresses if they are blacklisted somewhere or not. It offers some, you can basically request information on any individual IP address, and you can also use a commercial service to keep track of how your reputation is developing. So you might want to look into that if you're sending email. As a result, some services throttled down the number of emails they're willing to receive from us. So if we're sending to the, let's say, Gmail, if we're sending something like 10,000 emails per day from our IP address, they suddenly started to throttle it so that they only accept, let's say, 2,000 emails per day, which results a queue in our relay. You know, we can't push all the mail through, so our queue starts growing, and basically we lost track of how many emails are going through and how many are not. We didn't know the status of what's happening. And it has a potentially a huge impact, and we didn't really know what the status was. So we did something to fix it. We changed one of the relay IP addresses. There were two addresses, if you remember, and we swapped one of them to a new address. Well, what we didn't know at the time is that the email receivers, like Gmail, they keep track of how many emails they are receiving from an individual IP address. So when you pick a new so-called cold address and start sending thousands of emails from this cold address, they slow down even more. They think it's something fishy. This IP hasn't sent etuovi.com emails to us ever before, and now they're suddenly sending 10,000 mails a day. So it's not cool. They don't like it. We didn't know any of this. It was pretty much new to us. So our delayed queue built up and blew up even more as a result of our actions that we did. We tried more fixes. We tried to redirect all the traffic to the single IP address that was still warm, which consequently resulted it being blacklisted very soon as well. So we were screwed. We had both of our relays blacklisted, and we didn't really know the impact status of things. We didn't know anything. That happened really fast. So we started to take back control of things. We finally figured out that there's this open form on our website, which is basically the true reason for our reputation taking a dive and us getting blacklisted. That was the first thing that had to be done. I was a bit astounded that we actually had this kind of open form and stupid feature on our website, but it seems that anything can happen when there are enough people working on the same code base. Then there's no easy way out from these blacklists. Once you fall into them, there are hundreds of different blacklists. Let's say the MX Toolbox lists something like over 100, maybe 150 different blacklists, and they all operate a bit differently. They have different rules for when you get into the blacklist and the criteria by which you get away from the blacklist. Some allow us to make requests that we have fixed our system and we're, polite email senders now. Please remove our IP from your blacklist. They may, comply or not, and we can only ask and hope. Also, if we, for some reason, end up onto the same blacklist multiple times, and there's always a new problem, and we get, again and again to the blacklist, some of the blacklists have exponential back off, so you have to wait for longer and longer before they remove your IP from the blacklist. So we have to be quite sure that we have fixed all the problems before we, make the requests for removal. So our customers are angry, our customer service is taking phone calls and emails, our business people are a bit nervous of how things are going to turn out. Can we fix it? Do we need external help? But no pressure, take your time. Summer is coming. So what was wrong with our setup? Well, in hindsight, pretty much everything. We weren't doing much of the things that we should have been doing. We didn't monitor the relays, if the actual applications were running or not. We didn't monitor any email counts. How many emails are being delivered? How many bounce? How many complaints do we get? Nothing. There was no risk management. So if one of our websites, let's say Vuokraovi, ends up onto the blacklist because of their spammy emails, the other services get the hit as well because they're sharing the same relay. So that's bad, don't do it. There was no bounce handling, so when the emails bounce back from the relay or the intended target, our applications don't know anything about it. The information is stopped onto the relay. Only on the postfix logs was a couple of rows about email being bounced and being dropped. So there's no proper feedback to the application and to the actual service. There were no domain keys, identified mail signatures, DMARCs, and so forth. SPF was okay. I'm going to explain these acronyms in a short while. There was no feedback channel for positive, successful deliveries either. There was no analytics, no tracking, so we don't know how many emails get opened or how many get interacted with. So in hindsight, we didn't know what we were doing, which is sad, really. So quickly, I took the job of designing a better world for us. We wanted to switch from self-hosted postfix relay applications to a service. And as we're using AWS anyway, and they have simple email service, so we picked it up and started using it. Because it's a service, we can easily create these domain objects for test and QA and for production separately. So basically they have their own reputations. If the test and QA for some reason end up sending thousands and thousands of spammy emails, it won't interact, it won't cause trouble in the production, and vice versa. And also separation of distinct services. So Etuovi, if Etuovi screws up its reputation, it doesn't affect Autotalli or Vuokraovi. So, contain the problems and manage the blast radius of potential problems. Then we consider that since there are different mail types, like I said, high volume and low importance, and low volume but high importance, maybe we should separate them as well, so there would be less risk. But so far we haven't done that yet. We want to see if we can manage without it. It would be maybe overkill at this point, but we have the option to do so. So this is the outbound email infrastructure today. And this differs so that each service or each environment, like production and test, have a copy of all of this. So we don't have only one infrastructure, we have for each environment basically similar setup. The Amazon SES has 3 dedicated IP addresses. This is for Etuovi production. And the 3 public IP addresses are the things that we have to manage the reputation for. So we have to take care that these 3 IP addresses never send any spam out. We don't want to send any spam anyway, but that's what we have to do. So then the feedback channel has changed. The SES can transmit to the simple notification service, notifications about successful and failed and bounced deliveries. And then we have Lambda functions that pick up these notifications and store them to DynamoDB. And we have, of course, we can do anything else we want with the notifications as well. And this is basically the setup we have. The purpose of the DynamoDB is to store the information. It's like a replacement for postfix log files at this point. So our system admins can go there and figure out for individual emails that if these have been successful and when they have been delivered and so forth. I'm going to return to this subject a little later. So we had to adopt it slowly. We moved our operation gradually from the old relays to the new ones because we still had the cold IP address, warm IP address problem. So we built in software a load balancer so that the application that is spewing the emails out sent certain percentage of the mails via SES and the other mails still via the old system. And this took something like 6 weeks or something to do the shift from the old system to SES. SES also has its own warm-up feature, but there are some problems with it. It basically balances between shared IP addresses in the SES, and they are shared in the context that all the Amazon SES customers may share the same IP addresses. So we can't really manage the reputation over there, and we don't know if the involved IP addresses are actually blacklisted or not. So we didn't want our traffic to, overflow to the shared IP address space. That would be problematic and, difficult to predict how it works out. Yeah. Okay, I promised I'll return to the acronyms later. So there are multiple methods for, convincing the receiving end that we have actually sent this email, and that our IP address that is sending the email is actually legit. And all the methods involve in using domain name service. You add some extra records to your domain, and the receiving end can verify some information via DNS. First one is sender policy framework. So basically you add a record to name service that specifies the IP addresses that may send for your domain. And it has this indirection that you can refer to address lists that are maintained by some other party. For example, where the text is a bit poor, but we refer to AmazonSES.com domain. So Amazon obviously maintains its own IP address list, which is involved with SES. So we only refer to their list. Similarly, we refer to SPF list maintained by Salesforce and Outlook.com and so forth. We could add an individual IP address to this list as well if we, wanted, but this is the current setup, and it covers, as far as I know, everything that is using our domain for email sending. There are some problems with SPF. If you are using an email forwarding service, like in Finland, some people are using iki.fi, basically the idea being that you get an email address that is valid forever, and it only forwards the mail to Gmail or Outlook or whatever. So there's a level of indirection when sending the mail. Well, what happens is that the receiving end, which would be Gmail or Outlook, doesn't see the original sender. It sees the servers of the iki.fi service. So it basically masks the original sender and the SPF lists that we have specified don't match anymore. So we lose the control. So SPF alone isn't sufficient and doesn't, work. And also, we give an indication. The last poorly visible text there is tilde all, which is indicating to the receiver that if you receive an email from an IP address that isn't covered by this list, you should soft fail, which means that this mail appears suspicious. You might want to put it into junk mail folder or spam folder or something. It's not, it's not normal. So another method is domain keys identified mail, which is basically signing the sent emails. It basically takes some email headers and the body of the email, and it calculates a hash value and then adds the hash value to the email headers. And the receiving end can fetch from the DNS related encryption key and decrypt the hash and recalculate the hash and verify that they match. It sounds a bit more complicated than it actually is. And in our use case, for example, we didn't have to do any application level modifications ever. We only enabled it on AWS SES, and it takes care of it, and the receiving end takes care of the verifying and filtering part without any changes. Not all receiving systems verify the signatures or do anything with them, but they have the possibility to do so. And also, domain keys identified mail doesn't give any indication of what to do with the mail if the verification fails. So here's an example of these headers. This is some email that I sent to myself via our infrastructure. So there's the DKIM signature header with some contents. And there are two headers because Amazon SES adds its own header, and then there's the similar header for etuovi.com domain as well. And they are, I think I have another slide. I have a spam filter that I'm running myself, and there are the X-spam status header, which indicates that it has a DKIM signed, test is successful, DKIM valid AU, and then there are SPF pass. So this spam filter, spam assassin, is happy because it sees a successful SPF test and it sees successful, DKIM signature verification. So it can trust that the mail was sent via our system, via our service, and we have actually done it ourselves. It's not sent by a spammer under our name. So one more, DMARC. This combines SPF and how do you pronounce that? DKIM, something like that. Because the SPF and DKIM aren't sufficient on their own. This is like a new standard covering both of those, and it gives an indication to the receiver what should you do if these tests fail. And there are multiple options. There's none, there's quarantine, and there's reject, at least. And the idea is that you can use, DMARC includes a reporting feature. You can request, like in the last line, we have mail to dmarc@etuovi.com. So we can request the receivers to send reports, like statistics of emails that they're receiving from our domain, of how do our emails look? Do you think they are spam? Are you bouncing them? Are they successfully received? And it's deconstructed, I think, in the next slide, but the like the feedback channel is important here. That's a new feature. The SPF and DKIM never report anything back. We don't know if they're working okay or not. But with DMARC, we get the reports, we get more visibility on how our emails are going through. So here are some of the fields from the DMARC DNS entry. So we're telling that if the DMARC tests fail, so if SPF or DKIM fail, you should quarantine the mail. You should put it into spam folder or junk mail folder or something. You should send aggregate reports like once per day to this email address, and then we can request specifically what kind of failures should be reported, and we're currently requesting SPF failures. This is there's a good reason for this. Not all mail receive the DKIM stamps. There are multiple routes by which the emails can go out. So not everything is sent via SNS or SES. So let's say personal mails don't go out that way. They don't have the appropriate signatures in them. This is a capture from our SES console. Basically, we have email feedback forwarding enabled, which means that when there are bounces from the emails, they are dispatched to the SNS service and to the topics. And our domain status is verified, so SES is confident that we are controlling etuovi.com domain. The DKIM settings are generated. SES helps with the DKIM setup. It can generate the DKIM DNS entries for us. And if you're using Route 53 for your DNS, they can automatically create those entries for you. So it's easy to deploy. The signing is enabled, and there's a bounce domain specified. The bounce domain, the mail from domain, is important because the DMARC system requires domain alignment and basically wants the bounces to be sent to etuovi.com subdomain. Recently, SES and Amazon released a reputation dashboard. So this is our reputation from this morning. The bounce rate is under 5%, which is good. And the complaint rate is 0, and Amazon wants it to be under 0.1. And if we don't comply with these things, if we have bounce rate larger than 5, or if we get more complaints than is allowed, then we risk suspension of SES use. So, but anyway, our reputation appears good as per Amazon's, understanding of things. What remains to be done? Well, we don't have the application level bounce and complaint handling yet. So we only get the DynamoDB, lines or what have you, entries of each mail. But we want to have a feedback cycle directly to our application. So if a single email address is failing constantly, it refuses to receive our mail, then we just cease sending any further email to that address. There's no reason for this process to be manual. We can automate it. It's just something we haven't done yet. We also, in my opinion, need better analytics for the messages. We have to know how many mails have been opened, how many mails have been interacted with, have the links been clicked or not. Also, I posed a question that should we cease sending these emails, let's say watchdog emails, for some passive users that haven't been on our website for 6 months? Is the mail sending still, does it make sense? Does it make sense to send marketing, or should we send some kind of activation messages for these passive users after 3 months, something? We're not doing this part right. We're not doing it, I think, sufficiently or at all. So there's something to improve here. Some pitfalls. Yep. Yeah, so the question is that isn't there a fairly recently introduced feature for SES that actually adds a tracking pixel for the mails? Yes, there is. We haven't really looked into that yet, and we're not sure if it covers all our needs. The tracking pixels, as far as I know, require for the email client to load all the images for the pixel to get loaded. And I'm not sure if this is the only way to do it or the best way to do it. Other methods of tracking would be, since we have links to announcements in our watchdog mails, we should add some URL parameters or something that tell our end of the system that this watchdog was, this watchdog has been, sent the mail. It's and the user is entering our website because of this email. So I'm pushing it to our product people to figure out the exact details of how to do it. But I'm just, messaging that do something, fix this. And but a good question. Yes, SES does have a feature for this. I don't know how exactly it would, append this tracking pixel to our mail, but we have to try it out and see. Okay, so pitfalls. We don't know, or we didn't know, who is sending mail for our domain. There are marketing emails that some partner might be sending, and they're using, let's say, customer service at etuovi.com kind of from address and so forth. So just figuring out what kind of mails we have and who's sending them and where, how are those mails going out, which relays or systems are they using. It took some time. I'm worried if we have covered every sending server or IP address with our SPF records, and not all emails will ever have the DKIM signatures, as I spoke before, because there's always some kind of alternate route for the emails to egress, and they will not have the signatures. So the DMARC happily combines SPF and DKIM, and they work better together. And people in general have no idea of how any of this works. So we have been sending emails for 20 years or something, and we don't have people who know how any of this works. We had to read a lot of documents on the internet, and also things have changed. If you, I mentioned the RFC documents that are specifying all these things, they have been fairly recently updated or even created. So I think 2015 was the date for the DMARC specification. So if you have been, like us, have been operating for 5 years or so without changing or improving anything, you might want to reconsider. Takeaways. So the old SMTP protocol might be simple, but when you have to send a lot of emails and take care of your reputation, it's not so simple anymore. Just do your best to do good. Maintain your reputation. Find out tools and services that give feedback to you of how are you doing and performing at this very point. Don't send spam. Don't send anything to cold addresses. Only send for those email addresses that have given permission for you to send emails. For us, it's easy because we have the save search function and the related watchdog function. So each user has actually they want our emails. But if you get offered, let's say, email lists on the internet for marketing purposes, and they haven't requested your mails, you're sending spam, so don't do it. You have to keep up with the latest changes, like I just said, and keep in mind that the email in general as a messaging channel is unreliable. You can always lose a mail for any reason, and just take a statistical approach to email. You have to do as well as you can. Use other channels where appropriate. So if you have something, some kind of messages that have to be delivered to customers, you might want to consider push messaging or, I don't know, some other platform than emails. But of course, as I told you before, you have to follow your customers. If your customers are using email, then that's the way you have to go. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. If we have short time.
Yeah, if you have any questions, you can ask me now. If you're hesitant to speak English, you can ask in Finnish as well. I'll do my best to translate. You can also ask me questions later when hanging out, so. Yeah, the question was that are we using the SES API or are we using it as an SMTP relay? We're using it as an SMTP relay, so it didn't really require any application level changes. We only reconfigured the application to send via SES, and it's fine. Any other questions? Apparently no. Okay, I have a question for you, so just please raise your hand. Was there anything new to you in this presentation? Okay, so it wasn't a waste. That's nice. Have you run into trouble with email? Okay. All right. But anyway, thank you. Sure. The question was, how do we manage our bounce rate? So the the events are going to DynamoDB, and we have our maintenance people who keep an eye on how many bounces are we getting daily. And we also have we have created a CloudWatch dashboard, which draws a graph of daily bounces. So we have some kind of idea of how many we are getting of those. Yeah. So well, the automation, the vision of the automation of how to disable the non-functional, email addresses. We currently only disable the watchdogs related to those email addresses, and that's pretty much sufficient for our purposes at this moment. But it's application specific, of course. If we have other types of emails, large volumes of those, we just have to figure out how to disable it. Do we remove the account entirely? Do we mark it somehow that don't send emails to this address? There are various options, but it's there's no, depends on your application. Did we see a peak during the summer or during the migration? We don't really have, we'd have to figure out the numbers before the migration from the postfix logs, and that's tedious work. We did some scripting and we have some numbers, but I don't have any graphs for you and so forth. Our best understanding is that there was no spike. Most of our problems were when we were actually sending spam and we were blacklisted. That was, we really had trouble. But after that, everything was, got suddenly quite a lot better, and we're doing great now, so we have basically no problems. You can never have a 0% bounce rate. There's always going to be something failing. The target systems can be down for some reason or something, so bounce it's not a problem, normal.